We continue Real Estate Matters with Stewart Titles. Thank you for staying with us. Another cybercrime edition. Very valuable information here. We have Tom Cronkright. He is the CEO of a company called Certifid, helping people prevent the cybercrime and all the problems there. And we have Tom Carpentier, president of Stewart Insurance. Gentlemen, let's pick up where we left off. We were leading towards the solutions and things people can do to prevent this. And Tom Cronkright, you started the company. As we started your story, you now have a company. You're helping people prevent this kind of thing. Let's tell people some of the mechanics of that.
Yeah, so based on our experience, and then that was 2015. Fast forward to just the fall of 2016, so roughly 18 months later, we had seen several instances of fraud attempts that were much more sophisticated than what we fell victim to. So the root of the issue as we saw it was the lack of identity. How do we know, as you had mentioned earlier, so many parties in a transaction, they're 7 on average typically, communicating electronically, all connected to the internet with everything. How do we know at some critical point when instructions to send money or to confirm where money's going to go is coming from a trusted source? And the root of that, as we saw it, was identity verification. So we created a technology company that does two simple things. It's high tech, but in a simplistic form, we confirm identity in real time, and we have the ability to securely send or confirm wiring instructions before somebody wires funds. So what that means is, you're a buyer and you're in the process of getting ready to close, or maybe before, that you have to wire in your cash to close amount or your pre-equity amount. How do you know that you can trust the wiring instructions that just showed up in your inbox? Certifid allows the title company, for example, to confirm that it's you and safely transmit that information in a way that both parties can trust. The same is true. You're a seller, you're about ready to close, or you're just entering into a purchase agreement. How do we know that your equity payment will safely arrive in your account? Certifid is used to confirm your identity and then validate the bank information that the title company received, because the truth of it is anyone's email could be compromised. The buyers, the sellers, the realtor, the title company, but the person whose email is compromised might not be the target of the fraud. A lot of times they'll compromise a title company or a real estate agent for the purpose of defrauding the buyer or the seller, to divert the wire somehow to an account. So that's what it does. It's easy to use. Many companies in Texas using it. Stewart being one of those security-forward companies, certainly in that group. And I think it's a must-have these days. You have to be able to leverage technology in a good way to confirm identity. I think the other thing that's important, and I mentioned this earlier, is just making sure that you're working with a company that really has their hands around the gravity and the scope of this issue. Because if they don't, you could be the one writing the check. And then, to Bill's point earlier, an insurance claim or litigation is not where you want to end. That's a total failure of everything. All right, we want to avoid it in the beginning. We're operating, like I say, within Texas and roughly 40 states right now. Just yesterday morning, we picked up devices in Kuwait and North Korea. So we have, it's just a very, very active landscape on a day-to-day basis of fraudsters that are trying to impersonate someone in a transaction, and we kind of smoke those out in real time.
And I'll tell people your website is certifid.com, and Certifid is spelled CERTIFID. CERTIFID.com. And Tom, the people that reach out, who are the people that begin using your service? Is that the buyer, seller, or is it the title company?
No, it's typically the title company, and the reason is the title company is holding the escrowed funds. So the title company is meant to be neutral ground for all transactions. It takes the incoming funds from the buyer and typically the new lender if a mortgage is being involved. They have to properly and accurately close the transaction, and then after it closes, it disperses. So you kind of have all this incoming flow of funds, and then after closing, you disperse out to pay off mortgages that the seller may have, and to pay off, the equity proceeds on what's left over. And just what I described is about $2 trillion a year in and out of escrow accounts in the title and settlement industry. It's a massive amount of money. So title companies should be using the platform because it provides just a next-level identity verification. It's easy to use. I mean, a buyer and seller would receive a certified request. They'd go through a simple flow to confirm it's them, and then they would either acknowledge wiring information that is being sent to them for a transfer into an escrow account for a closing, or they would confirm bank credentials if they're receiving a wire after the closing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tom hit the nail on the head. It's something's needed to authenticate the destination of the money. We've talked about it a lot today, just the number of, parties of the transaction. And, quite honestly, in our experience and seeing folks fall victim to these schemes, the biggest impact or the biggest cause is really the human element. And so we've got to have, in the industry, we've got to have something that kind of protects us from ourselves, if you will. And I think that's where this tool really comes in, because we've, insuring organizations, we've seen every one of the schemes occur where money is sent to a fraudulent account that was shown to be originally the mortgage payoff account. Fraudulent money being sent to accounts that were supposed to be going to those sellers for their equity proceeds, and the big one that we've talked about is the buyers getting instructions and not doing anything once they receive those instructions to validate and authenticate the destination account. So Tom and I connected, and we're starting to work together to really continue to bring awareness to the market, but also bring a series of solutions out there that preventative actions in terms of best practices on the processes that every party of the transaction can kind of follow to help reduce their exposure, and then also introducing his service where it makes sense for organizations to implement, and then continuing to find ways to create the backstops in the event all this stuff fails to protect. Then there's insurance that can help support it as well. But I will tell you that from an insurance perspective, it's becoming a risk that is not extremely attractive to insurance companies because of the frequency and severity of this occurring. So.
And the precision, it sounds like, with the way these people operate, too. It's not they're just guessing when they're making moves with banks and emails. It's like Tom was saying, the timing.
It is the timing,
precise.
100%. I heard one cyber professional explain it as it's an offensive game plan that they continue to modify and perfect, and the rest of us really have to kind of continue to up our defensive game, and quite honestly, that offense is probably going to continue to win more times than not, unfortunately, until we get around this stronger from an industry perspective.
And Tom, as you're helping people all over the United States, it sounds like, do you see the cases of fraud geographically driven? Are there some areas more than others? Like you said, Grand Rapids, who's going to think about that? But somebody did. They thought they liked Grand Rapids as a target. But are there some spots in the country that are more popular with the cyber criminals?
No, I'd like to say there are. What's interesting about real estate, just to echo what Tom was mentioning, is all the information is publicly available. So if I'm a real estate agent, Bill, and I list your property, that's visible online to not only the MLS, the multiple listing service within the part of Texas where you live, but it'll syndicate to Zillow and Trulia, everywhere in real time. So they don't have to guess whether or not somebody is selling a property. They also don't guess whether or not there's an active transaction that's in the process of closing, because you actually track statuses. You can go to active listings, or you can go to those that are, under contract or pending. And that's the real stink of it, if you will. And then, oh, by the way, all information on who owns land in the United States is public by law. So you don't even have to guess who owns the property. So I used to think, and this is why it hit us kind of blindsided, that this is what I call an NFL town problem, right? This is a big city, big market problem. They're actually, I would say, geographically and transaction agnostic. And I think they're starting to prey on some of those more rural areas because they are so trusting. They're less, as a group, security forward. And they think, well, we know everybody. We're in a town of, 5,000. This isn't going to happen. And then it does. They don't care if they're harvesting $5,000 on an earnest money deposit or $5 million on a commercial loan payoff. They simply don't care. And I think, but on average, the amount of the wire fraud that we see per instance hovers around 180 to 300,000. So that sweet spot's somewhere in the mid to high twos right now. But that good question. Don't think because you know everybody, or you're in a small town, or you have this kind of value system that runs as part of the ecosystem that you're insulated or somehow immune. They simply don't care.
Going back to your first experience, and you mentioned there was litigation. How did that work out? Did they pay a penalty for what they did? Did they catch these people?
So here's the frustrating thing, at least for me, and
because they were far away. It sounds like. Yeah,
they were far away. So we went ballistic on these people from a litigation standpoint, because you don't want to steal money from two attorneys in Grand Rapids. Let's just say that, right?
Let the word go forth, everybody.
We're going to come back swinging hard, which is what we did. They were launched. So this syndicate was actually responsible for over $4 billion with a B in attempts in Canada and North America over a 4-year period. I mean, this was a massively large cyber syndicate that hit us. And they were romance scams. Law firms were being hit on corporate settlements that were scams, title companies. What the frustrating thing for us was when we were originally learned of it, I remember to this day, it was like time kind of stopped as I was getting the information from my assistant. The FBI, just because it was a one-off $180,000 loss, they don't have the resources to investigate anything like that. I mean, you have to have a north of $1 million or $2 million loss to have a kind of an investigation open, is my understanding. So we were kind of on our own, and they can't share a lot either. Now, it since has gotten a lot better with the IC3 and their willingness to really get in and try to recall or freeze the funds and recall them back without having to investigate. So they're much better. There's a whole infrastructure and playbook now to try to get the funds back. We have it actually on our website in the resources tab called When Minutes Matter. It's a white paper. The challenge for us is we were on our own and there was no roadmap. This was all new. We couldn't find anything online that would even give us a sense of how to recall. So yes, we were able to freeze accounts. We sued people individually. We sued corporations. I mean, we dropped the net as wide and as far as we could, and it was kind of penny or by pound. We got our money back piecemeal. That's assuming two things. That's assuming that lawyers work for free, and they don't, and that our time was worth nothing because we probably had several hundred hours in the recovery, notwithstanding the Department of Justice trial. It's just something that is avoidable, actually, and you just want to do everything you can to avoid it. That's really the moral. So using platforms like ours, education, thinking before you move money and act, just a few minutes of check-in and proactive communication between the parties in a deal could mean the difference between a safe closing and
losing your life savings. Yeah, I think that's 100% it. If we leave today with anything, it's if you're responsible for sending money or receiving money as part of a real estate transaction, stop and find ways to authenticate the instructions or the destination account, and communicate. If you're a buyer or seller, communicate through your agent, connect with your title company directly, and just take that proactive step and saying, I'm being asked to do this, and get that verbal confirmation, and use the old-fashioned telephone in that process.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, Tom, stay on your toes more than ever right now when it comes to these transactions. The other thing, as I was thinking about, Tom Cronkright, when you were talking about not just in real estate, but the categories the other categories, when you're talking about romance, I hear about that as far as the online dating sites. But what's interesting, it all kind of starts, it seems like, with identity. And we have heard the word identity probably more now in the last 3 years than ever. We've heard the term cybercrime, cyber criminals more than ever. But it seems like it starts where people are surveilling us or entities of some sort, and then the move is to steal somebody's or a company's identity. That puts the crime into motion, it sounds like. So we must be very careful, I guess, to the best of our ability to protect our identity at all costs and turns.
Yeah, I think if I could give one tip out to everyone listening, it would be, securing your accounts, your email accounts, your Facebook, your Instagram, your whatever you're interacting with, Amazon. And you say, well, I've got a username and this, super secure password like 12345 or whatever it is. What I'm really saying is look into turning on two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication onto those accounts. That's a 60-second per account exercise. And what it'll allow you to do is really harden or further secure the account, because in addition to the username and password, you have to receive a code or a token that's sent to you by text or through an authentication app to get into the account. So even if a fraudster's in my account right now, let's say my Gmail account, and I go on and click on two-factor authentication, it'll boot that guy out, and then he won't be able to get back in because he won't be able to receive the codes that I'm receiving because they're not sent through email. And I think that's single-handedly, if you have a camera system like Nest or something like that, everyone has this technology so that you're not compromised through the account, because once they have access to an email account, it's almost over. Like if you're reading real-time information, your ability as a fraudster to trick somebody is so much better, because it's so believable and timely. And that's what we're seeing. They're not guessing. On average, they're actually in someone's account almost 6 months, monitoring, looking at email traffic, who they're communicating with, when, what are they saying, who plays what role, and then all of a sudden, looks like John Doe is going to send funds in. Looks like I have the exact number because I'm reading the closing statement, and then boom, somebody gets tricked.
So the email, it sounds like they could be looking at my email or yours right now and just watching it for weeks.
Weeks or months.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the old saying, if you haven't been hacked, you will be.
Oh, no, that's
It's just
terrible.
a matter of, what defenses do we have? And I'm just saying that turning on that, you go to the security settings in your account, and turning on multi-factor authentication is just key, and making sure your transaction participants, your realtor, your lender, your title company are using that type of technology and using secure email to keep the bad guys out. Really important.
Well, as we have, I don't know, maybe 7-8 minutes left for all of us here, what are some of the closing things we want to make sure people know about? Certainly Tom Cronkright, CEO of Certifid. Let's tell people again the website and how else they can reach you, and what else they should know about your company, Tom.
Yeah, what you should know is our system should be used by any title and settlement provider that's in a real estate transaction. So if you're working with a company other than Stewart or somebody that isn't, then you have to ask them about it. The website is certifid.com, certifid.com. You can reach us directly, 616-855-0855. So 616-855-0855. And I think my takeaways, and I'll hand it over to Tom, are really threefold. Let's secure our email accounts through multi-factor authentication. Secondly, let's have the conversation with the transaction participants that are advising you if you're a buyer or seller in a home purchase or sale about this issue of wire fraud. And then really lean in and be suspect of anything that seems out of the ordinary, anything that changes, anything that has to be done right now. Also, if anybody ever asks you on the phone or email to confirm that you sent money, you got to slam the brakes, because that's just there are clues out there. But I think education, awareness, and getting close with your partners about what they're using to protect you in the transaction is critical.
Yeah, I would echo the exact same. If you're a real estate agent out there listening, be sure to communicate with your buyers and sellers about this risk. If you're a property owner preparing to enter a transaction, communicate with the professionals and just make sure you understand the process for the transfer of money and what your responsibility is as part of that, and make sure you understand the instructions. And then, as Tom mentioned, if you're getting any instructions to change or any follow-up, that should be a big red flag. So we'll continue to bring awareness. Again, we talked about whether this was a big city or a small town situation. From our perspective and seeing the folks that have been impacted just in the last 12 months, it's across the board. It doesn't matter, because, as we mentioned, there's $2 trillion in a given year flowing. That is a big number, and these guys can chip away at 50,000 or 500,000 in one transaction.
Yeah.
So they're not picky.
And Tom Carpentier, let's tell people, if they want to know more about the cyber insurance, the things that you're doing at Stewart Insurance, what should they do?
Yeah, sure. If you're a real estate professional and you want to have a deep dive conversation with our team about insuring your organization, developing some best practices to prevent your group victim to any of this, how to communicate with your clients about this risk, and then on the backside developing a strong insurance plan, give our team a call. We work with the insurance professionals across the board, across the country, and we're educating, we're supporting the development of best practices, and then we're also developing those insurance plans. And we can, as always, be reached at 866-798-2827. That's 866-798-2827, or you can go to stewartinsurance.com to learn more about us.
That sounds great. And Tom Cronkright, would you tell us, as far as the future for your company, it sounds like you've done very well. You're helping people here in the last couple of years. What's it look like as you look ahead for 2020? What are some of the things? Do you see any other trends that we should know about that are happening in this cyber world, or how are you looking at the new year coming up?
We're looking at it in several different aspects. A great question. If you ask the FBI or the Secret Service or any type of law enforcement what keeps them up at night, there seems to be one resounding theme, and that's social engineering. Mm-hmm. This concept that these fraudsters are just getting better at crafting the messages in a believable way, having more success, impersonating or influencing. That's the social engineering part of it, and I think that's a trend that we think will continue. That type of fraud actually surpassed ransomware for the first time this year in the amount of insurance claims that were coming into global insurance providers. The trend of just tricking people and finding enough information and transaction level details about doing that before they do, I think that's a trend that will continue. For us, our mission hasn't changed. We continue to dive deeper into insights and layers of security that provide proper identity authentication. So we're going to continue to make sure that two people that expect to be connected in a transaction are the right people. And we will continue to safeguard the transfer of funds. So far, to date, we've safeguarded over $6 billion in wire fraud transfers. And we're proud to, every month we're picking up things overseas and domestically that's just fraud. There's just no question that this is really high-risk behavior that we're seeing coming in. So I think it's unfortunately, and I'm an optimist, kind of like Tom was saying, they're not going away. There's just too much money that they're harvesting out of this industry. So I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we're going to be just like Tom's doing, right? We're aligning with companies like Stewart and other data providers to make meaningful impact to try to hold the line on this. So I'm hoping that we have a year of parity next year. In real estate, by the way, wire fraud is going up 500% a year over year, the last 3 years.
On that note, Tom Cronkright, CEO of Certifid, thank you for being on the show. People can go to Certifid, CERTIFID.com. Give them a call at
616-855-0855.
And Tom Carpentier, Stewart Insurance. People can go to stewartinsurance.com. It's that easy. And do not be sad that the show is ending at the time of broadcast. No, because it's in the cloud. It never ends. You can always go to stewart.com. Or you can go to Grand Rapids, Michigan for some winter weather. Right, Tom?
You got that today, brother.
You
got it.
I'm on my way. Stewart.com/Houston. Thank you all for listening to the show. And thank you, Tom Cronkright, and your team up there in Grand Rapids, Michigan at Certifid. And until next week, Real Estate Matters with Stewart Title, Stewart.com/Houston. Thank you, everybody.